According to Digital Foundry, having spoken with several developers, it appears that the Switch Pro, which we talked about like 5-6 times over the last few years, like probably the first time we mentioned it was probably about 3 years ago, when we were starting to come up with like, when is the Switch Pro gonna land? When are they doing a mid-tier refresh of this thing? Because it was, you know, when Breath of the Wild came out and stuff, people started seeing the console going, this is really, I mean, yes, the game looks good, but it kind of runs like ass. Like, clearly they're going to have to, if they're going to keep this console around for 6 more years, it's going to be running like a potato. Phones are going to be more powerful than this fucking console. So, apparently, according to Digital Foundry, who had several developers that they spoke with here over the last little while, discovered that it was actually indeed something that Nintendo was actively developing internally and preparing. And then, right up at some point, they said, you know what? Nah, fuck that shit. We're just going to come out with like an actual complete new, entirely separate thing. Whether it's still called the Switch or something else, but it's no longer going to be like a half, like middle of the road refresh. It's going to be like a completely fucking new top down. And I think the closest, you know, the proxy that we got was that OLED model that came out. And so I think that the OLED model is like a portion of what the Pro would have been, except instead of swapping out all of the guts, they just swapped out a couple of the innards, put the new screen on, sent that bitch out the door so they didn't lose all of their money, and then started getting back to work on what is the next thing that's going to come from Nintendo in terms of a console. Now, the Switch launched. When did the Switch launch? Fucking, was that like 2016, 2015? I gotta remind myself because time.
Probably 16.
Time is a flat circle. 2017, March.
Okay.
So we're going into the 6th year. And considering the hardware that bitch came out with, 6 years is a real long fucking time. It's a real long fucking time. So, they did say that whatever Nintendo is working on is very much not gonna be out in like 2023. However, that is their plan. It is a wholly new thing. Whether or not it takes the form factor of the Switch or if it takes the form factor of something else, who knows? If you're a betting man, I would like. Do you think the next Nintendo console maintains the Switch form factor, or do you think that they go back to separating out mobile and at-home gaming, and do two different units, like back with a 3DS and a home console, or do you think it will stick with the Switch form factor? What do you think?
I think they're going to go back. I think
any particular reason?
I just don't think it's.
Do you think that's more lucrative somehow for them in the long run?
I don't know if it's more lucrative, but I just think it might make more sense. Because when you're playing this in the form of the handheld opposed to the form of the console, the console performs way better than the handheld. So, at least for some games.
In some games, it goes back and forth depending on the resolution they're trying to push to the TV.
Yes. Yeah. So I think they might come out with like just a dedicated handheld, and that doesn't have a docking
feature. Yeah,
a feature. I think it would make more sense. I think the majority of people use it as a handheld, although I'm saying that right now, and my son and wife are upstairs playing it in its console form.
Yes.
On the TV.
Pokemon?
Pokemon. Yeah. So I don't know. I never really got the whole thing. I thought it was more of a gimmick than anything. Perhaps the console itself has a Bluetooth feature that you can basically use a screen, your TV.
Like casting it instead of
like a casting instead of actual docking. So, it's handheld. It's meant to be handheld, but if it's meant to be handheld, but for the ones that want to play it on their TV, you can cast it to your television, but still play it on the handheld. I think that's possible. I think it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, or it could, like, if Nintendo was working their way towards Sony and Microsoft's side, it would look probably more like streaming it to the TV, like via Wi-Fi
Correct.
or something like that.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm very interested in what they're going to do, because clearly the Switch was the natural evolution of the Wii U, where we had the console separate and we had the tablet in front of us, and Nintendo said, why not both? And we had the fucking Switch, and it was a smaller form factor than the Wii U pad. I think for me, the thing was that while I appreciate the handheld form, I still think, for me anyway, I don't know, maybe in the YouTube comments or even here in the chat, if you guys have a Switch, you let me know how you utilize your Switch. Even if you're playing it in handheld mode, I still feel like people were mostly still doing that at home. It wasn't something that they necessarily took on the bus, going to work, here, take out a fucking Switch and play the Switch in handheld mode on the subway or on the bus or what have you, going to work like they would have with smaller, because it's doable, but it's still pretty fucking big to like put into a carrier thing and stick it into a backpack in comparison to like a Nintendo 3DS, which was truly kind of a thing. And and the battery life was never so fucking incredible that it was doable anyway. But at home on a couch, if somebody else is using the TV, or maybe you just want to fucking like go to your bed and play some fucking games, it was perfect for that shit. Or if it was the kids and the adults want to use the TV, and you just give the fucking thing to the kids.
Now the more that you're talking about it, man, I don't know. Maybe they do keep it both, because there's a use case for both. Like,
it's true.
Like,
well,
I think
if
upstairs on the big screen. Like you said, my wife, when we go to bed, she just brings it into the bed, plays it for a half hour, puts it on the side, a table on the side of the bed, and goes to sleep. There's just something convenient about both options. Maybe they do keep both.
I'm torn about it because it's hard for me to separate my bias. You know, I want Nintendo to finally fucking produce a console that when I play the next Legend of Zelda game, it's at more than 15 frames per second. You know, like I want it to not just have people say it looks good for a Nintendo game. I want to say it fucking looks good. Right? When the Nintendo 64 came out and we got Ocarina of Time, nobody said it looks good at the time, obviously. And Nintendo 64 hasn't aged well, but it was polygonal shit back then. It was pretty hot at the time. Nobody said, oh, it looks good for a Nintendo game. They just said, Ocarina of Time looks fucking good. Majora's Mask look good. And then we even with the GameCube, same thing. GameCube was a pretty powerful little fucking console. Shit looked dope. Twilight Princess was a fucking good ass looking video game for them. They're capable, but the moment that they went to the Switch, that really stretched the Nintendo like philosophy of not necessarily needing the top of the top, but we didn't even get like mid of the mid. We got mobile. Basically. And so, yeah, so it's hard for me to separate the two. Like, personally, if I could choose a world, I would like them to go back to having an at-home console and a dedicated handheld to go elsewhere. But I think the challenge there is that I know that doesn't really make sense, because when you're talking about people, they've got a phone now to play games if they're away from the house. If they want to play Nintendo games, then the only way to do that, really, like, how many people are going to want to go from a Switch back to having two different Nintendo consoles? And then the other problem is, although Nintendo didn't suffer it nearly as badly as Sony did, although I think now that they went with the Switch, they would, because it'd be going backwards. Remember when Sony had the PSP and the Vita? Everyone said, "Well, why aren't these games just on the PlayStation? And why aren't the PlayStation games on the Vita?" And Nintendo, for the longest time, didn't have that issue because they always had the shit separate, and the games were never such a high fidelity that people questioned whether or not, or why not they weren't on both. But when they have the Switch now, it's all the same shit. You play Breath of the Wild at home on the TV, you play Breath of the Wild on the road with your Switch, it's the same game. It's all available to you. So, hard to go back from that. So I think in my heart, I want it to be separate, but I think in reality, it's going to be an evolution of the Switch.
Yeah.
And what will be interesting is how do they make, I think, I think the handheld is fine, but how do they just improve upon the whole system? You can't go smaller on the controllers. My hands are not gonna fucking work if that shit goes smaller.
I just think it'll be better battery life, OLED screens, you know. It'll
just better components
just
in
better
general.
Components, faster in general, more, you know. I just think that's what it's going to be. And probably you'll be able to transfer Switch files to whatever this is, kind of bring your shit over, and that'll be that.
You know what I would like, perhaps, is let's say they sold the Switch, a new updated Switch, whatever, new guts, new whatever the fuck, and it came with a standard dock, just like the Switch did. And that gets you basically just piping the normal Switch shit right out to a TV, but it allows them to keep the hardware at a level where your battery life is longer than 4.5 minutes when you're out on the road playing the games. And then, if people really want a better, deal at home, higher quality, higher fidelity, sell a separate dock that actually has like external GPU capabilities, so when you plug it in, it's able to actually play higher fidelity, let's say 60 FPS instead of 30 FPS in the normal dock mode, and allow them to make more use of that for bigger, grander games.
Well,
almost like a weird version of the expansion pack for the N64, except functional.
The only way I can see that working is if they made the new Switch, whatever this is, cheaper. So it's a cheaper console to get into.
Yeah.
But then have the option to buy a dock separately.
Yes,
so
that's what I mean. Yeah, separated.
Buy a dock. It does not come with a dock, but you can purchase the dock. And that's that. So that way your barrier to entry is cheaper. People feel like they're getting a deal. They're like, I never use the dock, so like this is great for me. I'll just buy this. And then the ones that want to experience that, or if they release more powerful games, perhaps it's like, hey, you can play it on the Switch, but if you want maximum performance, you have to get the dock. They might go down that route. Who knows?
Yeah, I think, and that would be the only thing I could come up with in that regard, as far as like, because otherwise the only way up is to just like, what else do you call it? The Switch 2? Like it's gonna be the same form factor, just with better internal hardware, a much more new, assuming another NVIDIA mobile processor, just a newer version or something along those lines, and a better screen. They already had the OLED screen in the fucking Switch as it is, so they've got that spun up, so they could just reutilize that and go from there. But yeah, I don't know what it is. I'll be very interested because Nintendo's really the only one that just, you think they're going in one direction because it makes sense, and then they just say fuck that shit, just throw everything out and start all over again. Just like, fuck all of it. And like nobody would have seen.
Yeah, but they're able to do that. That's the reason why they can. It's
exactly, which is why I'm interested.
And everyone's going to buy it, right? No matter what. So.
Well, except for the Wii U. Not everyone bought the Wii U. Okay. The Wii one hurt.
Yeah, but that was that was a fail. That was a fail.
They had the right idea, but the market was not ready for the Wii U. Nobody, or that name specifically. Nobody was ready for the name of that console. But yeah, I'm interested to see what happens when they do eventually release it. Maybe we'll find out more, but Nintendo is always close to the chest with this shit. I would at least like to know, maybe at the end of next year or something, 2023, end of next year, Nintendo finally says, hey, it's been nearly 7 years. We got something coming. And just let everyone know. It'd be nice.